Hi, my name is Miss Townsend. I love math. Let's do some math together. In this video, I'll be solving absolute value equations. There's an absolute value equation. Now we know what the absolute value signs mean. They mean that whatever the math inside of that absolute value bracket, think of it like a bracket, whatever this math is, the absolute value sign will ensure that the output is positive only. It measures the size of the value, not the polarity or positive or negative nature of it. So how do we work that into our algebra in order to solve? Well, what we need to do is we actually need to split this absolute value equation into two equations and solve each of them. So the first equation is one where we assume that what happens inside this bracket would result in a positive value, and therefore the absolute value signs have no impact algebraically. So I rewrite this equation using just a bracket instead of absolute value signs, and I'm going to solve for x there. But there's always a second option, which is that the math inside this bracket may result in a negative number, in which case the absolute value signs would change that to a positive. And algebraically, if we have a negative, but we want it to be a positive, we could multiply by -1. So I also have to write this absolute value equation, again, with a bracket instead of the absolute value signs. But of course, I'm introducing a negative sign out front because some x values would likely make that interior 2 minus 3x a negative, in which case the absolute value signs would actually do something, which is multiply by -1. So that's always the first step, is split the question into two different questions and then solve. So here I just have 2 minus 3x equals 11, so that bracket did nothing. Subtract 2 from both sides, divide by -3, and I get x equals -3. On the other side, I'm going to distribute that negative into the bracket. There's other ways to do it. That's just what I decided to do. Then I'm going to add 2 to both sides and divide by 3. So I get 2 answers. And it is useful, especially if this is a new algebraic skill for you, to go back to the original question and verify that your answers actually work. So, for example, if I were to put -3 here instead of x, what math would happen? Well, I would have 2 minus -9. So 2 minus -9 is 2 plus 9. That's 11. And of course, the absolute value of 11 is 11. No problem. So now let's test our 13 over 3 number. So if I substitute 13 over 3 for x, so this becomes 2 minus, those cancel, 2 minus 13. 2 minus 13 is -11. And of course, the absolute value of -11 is 11. So both of those answers make sense. And currently, with the students I'm working with, I'm encouraging you to write your answers using either interval or set notation. Because this isn't an interval answer, this is just two distinct numbers, then we will write it that x is an element of the set of numbers -3, 13 over 3, and that's the answer to that question. Good stuff. So good that I want to do another one. Let's look at another question. There we go. There's another absolute value equation. So again, the algebraic approach that we need to take when solving with absolute value is we need to rewrite that as two different equations. One with a bracket in place of the absolute value signs, and one with a bracket with a negative out front. So it is certainly possible for you to do some algebra first. Like, for example, you might decide to divide by -1 first and change the original question to look like this. And that's not a problem. That actually is probably easier than what I'm about to do. But I just wanted to show what this would look like if I didn't decide to do that first. So first, I'm going to write this equation with just a regular bracket in place of the absolute value signs. Nothing's different. I just put a bracket there. And I will solve for x here, so let's do that. So negative 4x minus 2 equals negative 3. So negative 4x equals negative 1. So x is a quarter. And then the other equation is where we put a negative in front of the normal brackets. So the reason why I wanted to show you that is just because, of course, we don't want to lose this negative sign, which we're introducing because of the absolute value algebra approach. And we don't want to confuse that with this negative, which is the negative that came with the question. So, of course, I know that immediately I'm doing a negative times a negative. So I actually just have positive 4x plus 2. But just make sure that when you're copying things that you don't, lose track of which negative you've written and not write both of those negatives so you know it's positive. So then I'm just solving for x. So 4x equals negative 5, and x is negative 5 over 4. So I've got two answers. It's always nice to check, a good idea to check. So if this is a quarter, so 4 times a quarter plus 2 gives me 1 plus 2, which is 3. The absolute value of 3 is 3, and then put the negative in front. I would get negative 3 here, and I already have negative 3 there. So I'm pretty happy with that answer. And if I test negative 5 over 4, so negative 5 over 4 for x. So this becomes negative 5 plus 2, which is negative 3 inside the absolute value brackets, which is just 3. And then there's this negative out front that I haven't dealt with yet. So the left side is negative 3, and the right side is negative 3. So I'm pretty happy with my answers. And I'm going to write my answer as a formal solution. I know my brackets are terrible. Let's see if I can do a nice one. Hold on. Scoop. Ooh. Oh, that's still ugly. Whatever. I don't have time to make it look pretty. I've got a typewriter if I want it to be perfect. Oh, that one was better. And just a reminder that when you are writing a list of numbers, whether they're solutions or whatever, to put them in numeric order from negative infinity on the left to positive infinity on the right. And that was so much fun. I'm going to do one more in this video. Don't you love that? Awesome. We're going to try this one. So I've got, now you may already know what the answer is, which is great, but I'm going to pretend I don't notice. I'm going to do exactly what we just did. I'm going to start by rewriting this equation exactly as it appears, but replacing the absolute value signs with normal bracket signs. And I'm also going to replace what I have with 2x minus 5 with this extra minus in front. So just a reminder, this is the minus sign that I'm introducing because of absolute value math. This negative sign is that one. So obviously together they'll make that a positive. But first let's go here. Negative 2x plus 5 equals 3. So negative 2x equals negative 2. So x equals 1. And over here, those multiplies negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So I end up with this. So 2x equals 8. X equals 4. And that all seems great, but look at what happens when you test it. So I'm going to test 1. If I put 1 here, I've got 2 times 1 minus 5. Well, 2 times 1 minus 5 is negative 3. So what I have is this. So this is the absolute value of negative 3, which is 3. And then there's still this negative out front, though. So the left side is negative 3, and the right side is 3. So that actually doesn't work. And if I test the 4, it also isn't going to work. So inside that absolute value, I would have 2 times 4 minus 5. So 2 times 4 minus 5 is 3. So I have the absolute value of 3, which is 3. Now there's a negative in front, so it's actually negative 3 on the left, but the right is supposed to be 3. So that doesn't work. And so there's actually no solution to this problem. No solution. And you may have noticed that from the very beginning, because what I have is an absolute value right here, which is always going to give me a positive result. It might give me 0, but unless I had 0 on the other side, we don't need to worry about that because we're interested in a number, not 0. So that will always give me a positive, which means this in front will always give me a negative. In other words, whatever x you give me, the left side of the fraction will be negative. Sorry, the left side of the equation will be negative. That's going to be negative, but it's supposed to equal positive, so there's no real solution. So just remember that when you're solving absolute value, it's worth your time, first of all, to have a actual look at the equation before you start to do math, because like I said, you may have noticed immediately before doing any math that there's no solution. And if not, then it is worth testing at least one of your answers to ensure that you didn't find answers when there aren't any. Excellent. I hope that's helpful. Enjoy doing some math.